always try to get coals on the bottom and on the top, because then it surrounds the blade with heat. Obviously these aren't coals right yet, but they're close enough. And you can see in there, if you look close, that metal is already starting to get red hot. It's only been in there for about 40 seconds. Very effective. You must always make sure though that your metal never burns. Once it goes past the critical temperature, which is your temperature for quenching, for tempering, you will start to have sparks fly from your steel. That's not good, because that's all the carbon in your high carbon steel fizzling out. It's reverting back to pure iron. It's not good. If you let that happen to your blade, you gotta ditch the blade, because basically all the carbon's burnt out of one area. So never, ever, ever, ever let your steel start sparking, because if you do, you ruined your knife. Just a word of warning. Top of the arch. Haven't been taking you through too much of the forging process, because it's not really something you can teach on the camera. You have to get out and pound some steel yourself to really get the feel of it and learn how it actually works. But I can give you basics that can get you started. So right now, what I want to do is finish bending this portion out until this is pretty much straight. I have a very thin edge line here. Then, what I'm going to do, I'm going to profile it just a tad more to my preference and fine tune it with a grinder. I need to bend this back. It's something I'll do after I finish this. And then I'll fine tune this as well. Drill 3 holes. 2 small ones for pins and 1 big one for a lanyard hole. My fancy little notch in, and then it'll be time for quenching. Okay, one last heat. Help me fix all the little bends and stuff in here and get it straightened out, because I've got it pretty much where I want it. Back into the fire. I'll heat it up to red hot, and then I'll let it cool in the dying embers. I said that I was going to put this back into the fire and let it cool in the fire. What that does is it anneals the steel. What it does is everything, all the molecules in the steel get bound up together. So it needs to be heated up and then slowly cooled to realign everything to where it's easier to manipulate. It's easier to grind. If I want to file this, I can file it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this edge a tad, because there's a few hammer marks that don't need to be in there. And it's kind of wavy right now. I need to fix my tip, and I need to cut a little bit out for the handle. That's all I really need to do. I'm going to buff it with one of these wheels right here. It's a DeWalt sanding wheel. Let's make sure that's in frame. Yep. There you go. And what this will do is this will just take off all the heavy duty scale and get it down to some bare metal to where it'll be easier to get it in and see where all the high spots are and take those down, and then it'll be on to the tempering process after I've drilled some holes here. So I'll get right back to you. Okay, now it's time to put on the sanding wheel and finish up buffing it up. I don't want to touch the edge too much back here of the spine because I want it to be a 90-degree spine. So it's just going to be a basic brush over everything, get it up nice. The handle feels good. It's a little bit warm. Handle feels good. I have some red micarta that I'm going to put on that. So I'm going to switch from the grinding wheel to the sanding wheel. I'll be right back with you. I wanted to say something to the grinder as well. You don't have to have a fancy DeWalt grinder. My dad was just tired of having a cheaper one and didn't want a cheap one after his old Milwaukee died out. But this one is not the expensive DeWalts. You can get very expensive DeWalts. But still, a simple angle grinder costs about 10 bucks from Harbor Freight, and it'll do the same work as this. Granted, it'll take a little bit longer because it will tend to overheat more than this one because this one's made better. However, you can get all of these attachments for it and it'll do the same thing. So if you're starting out on a budget, it might be a good idea to start out with a cheap grinder. And this can be the only grinder you ever use if you're using hand implements to sharpen the blade once you've got it sanded down. And you can just use sanding wheels like this to get everything down to a fairly nice finish. Has kind of a satin finish when you're done. I'll show that to you when I get done with this. But it doesn't have to be that expensive. So, let me put my hearing protection back on. Always wear hearing protection too. It just makes it much more comfortable. For using this, you could use a file for this. You could use a cheap belt sander for this. This is just a little bit faster. All I need to do is find out where all my high spots are really quick, knock them down with the regular grinding wheel because it'll cut faster than this, and then buff back over it again. That way I get a cleaner finish when I'm done. I'll have an actual flat grind because all the little pots that I made with the hammer, pounding it out flat, will be gone. Well, at least most of them. I like having some of the pot marks in my knives because it just makes it look cooler. But you'll have a smoother finish that any wood that you're going to be cutting it'll just ride much smoother and it'll look more professionally done. So I'm just going to beat off a little bit more on this side, move it to the other side. This will also get off any sharp burrs. And then I'm going to run back through on the high points that are still shiny and cut them down to size, and then run back over it with this wheel to buff it up and make it look nice. Because then after that, it'll make it easier to clean up and faster to clean up after it's been heat treated, which makes it nice because then you don't have to worry about overheating the blade and losing all your temper. So that's important as well. Be right back. Okay, so here's the blade right now. So I wanted to give you some glint. And that's that satin finish that sanding blade puts on. So I'm going to take this up to the shop and drill some holes. So I'll be right back with you.